Hello, David. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing with us your experience and expertise. So, before we take a step back through time and dive deeper into your journey of how you got to where you are today, why don't you start by kindly introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do professionally at the moment?
Okay, good afternoon. David Moma. I'm a biomedical scientist in the NHS. So basically, I work as a specialist microbiology biomedical scientist. In summary, my job description entails analyzing specimen in microbiology lab to detect pathogenic microorganisms. Specimen could range from blood samples, cultures for performing culture tests. It could range from screening tests for MRSA or CPE. And I also perform antibiotic susceptibility testing. I also interpret and report antibiograms for clinicians, and it spans beyond the diagnostic process. It also involves health and safety, completing risk assessments, also writing and reviewing SOPs for these procedures. I'm also involved in training, that's training and completing competencies for less experienced biomedical scientists, and also support staff like associate practitioners, band fours, medical lab assistants, band twos and band threes. I'm also involved in quality management, assessment like completion of NEQAS, EQA schemes, IQA as well. So I'm also involved in, when I worked as a senior BMS, it goes beyond the bench work. We also have managerial duties as well, staff supervision, order and stock taking, leave administration, and we also have appraisals, review, and some total. That's basically what I do. And each day is never the same. It's interesting with challenges. Yeah, that's in summary what I do.
A lot of people think that biomedical scientists just sit there putting things on machines, but like you've said, the role is very, very varied, and there's a lot of different responsibilities that biomedical scientists have. So one of the reasons, a little bit of background to why I wanted to do this discussion is because I get a lot of messages on social media platforms such as LinkedIn and X from laboratory professionals who aren't currently in the UK, and they ask about how do they get registered to work and practice as biomedical scientists in the UK. What is the process? What they need to do, and how do they find a job? So let me ask you, when you started this process, firstly, when was it? And where were you? So were you in the UK at the time or were you not?
I started my HCPC registration when I was in the UK. I was doing my master's in biomedical science. That was in 2016, midway through my master's program. At that point in time, I virtually did not know anyone who had had their HCPC before me. I didn't know who to network, or I just read what was on the website. And back then it was completely paper-based, not as it is currently. It's now electronic-based. Back then it was paper-based. I read the information requirements. I had to source the application form, get these forms across back home to Nigeria. After completing them, I sent them through courier. So one of the challenges was being paper-based. I had to send this across to Nigeria because they had to be endorsed by my line managers who I worked previous workplaces. My character references needed to be endorsed from Nigeria. And once this was completed, also my course information from my institution back in Nigeria also needed to be endorsed. Once I had all this, they had to also courier them back to me in the UK because I had to compile everything and submit them. Another challenge I faced with because I didn't really know that I could go through my head of departments for a verification request for my degree. So back then, I used my university's registrar's email, and that seemed to be a bottleneck in the process. There was some kind of bureaucracy. It took me 5 months and they didn't reply. So this spilled into 2017, early 2017. I had to get in touch with HCPC, ask them that this reference is not coming through. What do I do? Can I get reference from any other person? They said, yes, I could ask, even if it's a lecturer in my university, they just need a reference from the university. So I went back to my head of department. I requested, she accepted, gave me her details, and I passed this across to HCPC, and they sent the verification request, and this was accepted. So the major challenge I faced back then was being paper-based. I had to pay, that had a cost implication as well, paying for courier to and fro, and also the reference verification. So that's where I first challenges. Apart from that, also I didn't have a network of colleagues to like this is a good platform now where lots of information, people could meet other colleagues, mentors, mentees, you could seek guidance. And like I mentioned earlier, also supported lots of people to obtain their registration. I've also certified documents for so many people who have successfully obtained their registration via the international routes.
Could I disturb you for a second? So there's quite a lot of things that you've said, and let's unpack some of it so that we can discuss it in more detail. So you spoke about the application being all online now, and what I'll do is I'll link the description to the website where the application can be found, and also where all this information is also available. So if people want to read, they can find this information too. The website is very, very detailed. It tells you exactly what you need to do and how you need to do it. But having said that, it should be
Yes.
noted that
Yeah.
there is a paper-based copy available if people require it for accessibility purposes. So if you still require that, you can contact the HCPC and ask for the paper copy of the application too. So let's looking at the application now. So going right back to the beginning. So the application is divided into multiple parts. You mentioned you had to speak to your lecturers, you had to write back home to your university, to where you did your training. You also had to speak to your previous employers.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about what the require? First of all, what makes it eligible? How do you become eligible to apply through this route? And then we can talk about some of the other things.
Yeah, for eligibility in terms of standards of HCPC standards of proficiency, two things will make you eligible. That is one, your qualification, and two, your experience. So you must, when I mean in terms of qualification, that is your degree. So you must have completed a degree that matches with a biomedical science degree that covers that meets the standards of proficiency. Take, for example, I'll use my home country as an example, Nigeria. In Nigeria, it is known as medical laboratory science. But in the UK, it's known as biomedical science. In Nigeria, the course is completed for 5 years. And after the 5 years, you have a 1 year mandatory internship program, which you must complete. After that, you get signed off with the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria, and then you have your full registration license to practice. So if you measure that with the HCPC standards of proficiency, it meets up with the requirements. But we have seen instances where people approach me, they didn't study medical laboratory science, but they read something science related, something like maybe a bachelor's in microbiology. The honest truth is that someone who studied a bachelor's in microbiology, if you measure it up with the HCPC standards of proficiency, there will be gaps in terms of knowledge that it doesn't meet up. It will not meet up. There's lots of models a biomedical scientist covers that someone who did a bachelor's in microbiology would not have covered. And also their mandatory internship portfolio, microbiology would not have obtained that. So you might, if you go to assess your degree with the IBMS, they would give you lots of top-up models to complete. And that is where the issue is. Yep. So basically, your degree has to match up and your experience
So
as
could I ask you
well.
another question here? Well, first of all, a point that the training must have been done in a non-UK country. So to be eligible to apply through the international route, you must have done your training in a non-UK country. So you mentioned Nigeria; it could be anywhere in the
Yes.
world. So I've got a so I've got a
Yes.
question here, and this is for the people that may not be aware of the regulatory bodies. We've used the word HCPC quite a few times. You've mentioned the IBMS as well recently. So what exactly is the HCPC? And what role does it play in the practice of a biomedical scientist? And secondly, how does that relate to what the IBMS does, and what is the IBMS? If you could just explain that briefly.
Okay. The HCPC, that's the Health and Care Professions Council, is the regulatory body in the UK. They regulate 15 professions, of which biomedical science is one of them. So they are the ones that regulate the practice of the profession in terms of the issue you practicing license, and you have to abide by the standards of proficiency in terms of maintaining your professional knowledge through updating your CPDs and being of good character and conduct to practice. So that is why each time you review, you need to renew your HCPC. You have to acknowledge that your character, there has not been any change in your character in the last cycle while you were practicing. So they are more like the health check, the body that checks you as a professional. If there's any issue or concern with your practice, a service user can raise a concern to HCPC, and you'll be subject to an inquiry and investigation. So for the IBMS is the professional body, Institute of Biomedical Science. So it's more like professional body that provide range of services to support biomedical scientists. So if you're subscribed to the IBMS, you could do complete a registration portfolio, you could do a specialist portfolio, you could do a whole lot of advanced courses. They also have range of CPDs as well. As if you also subscribe, they have the Congress, which is now every 2 years. It should be annually before the IBMS Congress, where you network with lots of colleagues, review and exchange ideas. And so that's the role of IBMS. IBMS doesn't they also could evaluate your degree to meet that your foreign degree, to say it meets, to tell you if it meets with the standard required to obtain your HCPC registration. I need to spell this out clearly. Some people make a mistake thinking IBMS provides them with a license to practice. No, IBMS is not the licensing or regulatory body. It is only the HCPC, that is the Health and Care Professions Council, that can issue with a license to practice as a biomedical scientist. So if you're registered with the IBMS, that does not equate to having the license to practice as a biomedical scientist in the UK.
Thank you. So, like you mentioned, the standards of proficiency, there's about 15, I think, of them for biomedical scientists. And some of them are shared between all the other professions that the HCPC regulates. But then there are specific points specifically for biomedical scientists as well. And so that's something to keep in mind. So, a little bit earlier, we touched on education and training. And you mentioned, your degree has to be your degree has to be verified, and you have to provide information regarding the modules, what you studied, and your experience as well. The UK is an English-speaking country, and many other countries don't speak English as a first language. So, what is the requirement for English, and how is that judged?
So, English language proficiency. So UK, like you said, is an English-speaking country. Most people would not have studied in English, or they are not English-speaking countries. So to meet these requirements, HCPC requires you to provide an English language certification. That is one accepted is the IELTS. IELTS, yes, that's International English Language Testing System. And the minimum score is 7.0 with a minimum of 6.5 each component. They also accept TOEFL, test of English as a foreign language, and these both results must not be more than 2 years before you apply for your registration. So they have a validity period of 2 years. Alternatively, you could also evaluate your degree with ECTIS, UK NARIC. That's the issue with an English statement of proficiency to say your degree was taught in English. Those are the 3 avenues which you can meet and satisfy the requirements for English language proficiency. They need to understand for you to qualify to be registered, you're going to be working in an English-speaking country. So they need to know whether you can communicate, you're able to speak, write, read, and understand English. Okay.
So regarding the English proficiency that we were talking about, you mentioned that there's 3 different types that you can do. You can either do the IELTS, the TOEFL, or you can apply to UK NARIC to get your degree certified as whether it proves that you've got English proficiency. So in terms of the test themselves, do you know much about what they involve? Briefly, what elements are there? Is it reading, writing, speaking? Is there any presentations you have to do? Do you have much information on that?
For IELTS and the test of English, you're doing speaking, listening, reading, and writing different components. So that's why they said the minimum they accept each component is 6.5. For the NARIC ECTIS, you're not writing an exam. They only require your degree certificates, your transcripts, and a letter from your institution stating your degree was taught in English. So with those 3 documents, you can submit an application and they will issue you a certificate, a statement of comparability, stating that your degree was taught in English and is equivalent to a UK bachelor's degree. That doesn't involve an examination.
Yep. I think communication is very important because it's also one of the standards of proficiency as well. They should be able to communicate verbally
Yes.
with service users, carers, and other colleagues as well. So that's very, very important.
Uh,
Yep, go ahead.
sorry. Another thing, sorry, I just wanted to say something, it just skipped me. Um, another thing for the proficiency, I wanted to mention it. Sorry, it skipped.
That's okay.
I've forgotten it.
That's okay. No worries.
Don't
If you do
worry,
remember it, let
just
me know and we
go
can come back to that. That's totally fine. So we've
on.
talked
Okay.
about the English language requirements. We've spoken about your qualification and your training. So in terms of the documentation that's required, what other documentation do you need to provide for the application?
Okay, for the HCPC application, we are talking of the international routes. That is, you qualified outside the UK. So you need a full completed application form. That is, when I say full, that is every information that is required on the form must be entered. You need to make sure the form is correctly entered, no spelling issues, no mistakes. That's the application form. Then in terms of documentation, supporting documents, you need your degree certificate if you have a bachelor's, if you have a master's degree, if you have a postgraduate diploma or postgraduate degree, if you have a PhD. Some people may not have completed like a biomedical science degree, but they are trying to show that they meet up to the proficiency. So they would have to bring their entire arsenals. That is to say, if you're qualified up to the level of a PhD, why not include it? So your qualification certificates, you also need the HCPC course information form. This carries a comprehensive list, detailed list of all the models and courses you studied in university. And they have just completed the course form on the 1st of September 2023. It now requires learning outcomes for each of those models. So it's not just stating biology 101, cell biology, this, that. They need to know what are the learning outcomes for each of those models. And this institution also needs to state the practical and the theory components of the course. That's a percentage. What's the percentage of the theoretical aspect, the percentage of the practical components of the course? And this course information form has to be duly endorsed by the institution. Another important documentation is proof of identity. You need a minimum of 2 that has your facial, that's your photograph, and your name. So examples of this idea: your passports, driver's license, your workplace identity card, a national identity card, anything that carries your face and your name like an official document. You need minimum of 2. Another important documentation is proof of address. That is proof of where you reside. So if you say, for example, you're staying at ABC house, you need to provide a proof of address that carries your name and says ABC house. For an accepted form of proof of address is a pay slip dated within the last 3 months from when you are applying, a bank statement, or any official documents like maybe a employer's letter that carries your name and the address. Another important document is you also need to include the English. We mentioned that your English language qualification. You also need to include your professional experience, minimum of 1 professional experience. That's where you have worked, where you have applied your biomedical science knowledge to analyze laboratory samples. We are not talking of professional experience that is not related to biomedical science. So the professional experience has to be related to biomedical science. And I would, when I'm talking of documentation, some documents need to be certified before they are added to the application. So 4 of these documents need to be certified. Your proof of address, your identity documents, your degree certificates. They need to be certified. And people who are accepted to certify your documents are people in good professional standing, like doctors, any healthcare professional, clergy, high court judge, lawyers, solicitors. They just need to cite the original documents and a copy. And on the copy of the document, they need to state, I certify that this is a true copy of the original document seen by me. Append their name, signature, date, designation. Do that on all the other documents that need to be certified.
So could I?
So I think that's it.
Sure. I'm just going to ask
Yeah,
you a
you
question
can
here.
ask
So in
a
terms of
question.
certification, it has to be done by hand. You've mentioned you have to look at the original.
Yes, it has. That's what I was explaining to you earlier. I have done over like
Sure.
10. I've done like
Yeah.
10, yes, over the
So
couple of years. Yeah, certified
given this is
documents.
an online application, I think it's important to mention that once you've got your document certified, you need to scan it in and attach it to be able to send.
Yes, all supporting documents need to be scanned.
Yep.
And
So
when you have completed the electronic form, at each stage, like if you enter your degree, your qualification, it will ask you to attach the supporting document for your qualification. So at that point, you're going to attach your scanned, certified degree certificates.
yep. So you mentioned a few of the professionals that can certify your document. Could I not just ask my neighbor, my family members, or my best mate from the pub to also certify a document as well?
No, absolutely no. No, it has to be a professional of good standing in those categories specified.
Sure. Okay. So that's the document section done. And we talked about certification as well. What if your documents are in a different language? Not all documents are in English. Some are in the native language of the country.
Yeah.
So what is a process then? Because I'm assuming, this is an assumption on my behalf, that the people reviewing your application may not be able to understand what it says if it's in a different language. Technology has advanced a lot. There's lots of translation software available. But, in terms of providing translations, is that necessary? How should you go about doing it? And how do you certify that the
Mm.
translation is an accurate representation of the original document?
Yeah, you need to provide certified official translated copies. So all your documents, if they are not in English, you need to provide the translated copies of the documents, official copies, and these copies need to be notarized. That they need to be certified that they are original uh, documents from the translator. So you need to include that if your documents are not in English language.
Okay, so that's most of the application done. One of the big questions is, how much does it cost? In terms of just the application itself at the moment, how much does that cost? Is there a cost or is it free?
No, no. When you create an account online, fill out the application form, you would not be able to submit the application until you pay. It is called a scrutiny fee. That is what it's called. It's an application fee. So the cost used to be, it's increased of recently. The current price, it has £639 98 pence. That is the current scrutiny application fee. So once you pay this, you can submit your application, and you would ask about what happens after you submit, and I'll answer that later. So you can't submit without paying this fee. So the fee is a one-off charge for your application to be assessed and
Sure.
processed.
The application fee is one thing, that's 640 or whatever pounds it is. But then you might actually have other costs as well. Scanning of documents, printing of documents, getting them signed and
Absolutely,
certified. That might be an
absolutely.
extra cost that you need to be mindful of as well.
Extra
Yeah.
cost, yes,
Okay. So let's
yes. That's why it's advisable for people to go for the electronic version. It's easier. I think it's a quicker means. If you still want to do paper-based at this stage, when there's an electronic means, that's extra costs because you need to send them over by courier.
Sure. So now we've got to a stage where the application has been submitted. We've paid for it. Everything's gone through. Um, if everything goes well, how long roughly does it take to get a decision back? How long does it take to get the registration number?
Because of over the last 2 years, with COVID and after COVID, the HCPC has seen a massive increase in demand for registration from international uh, professionals. So they have had lots of pressure. When I registered in 2016, it used to be a standard 60 working days. That's 2 months. But now they can't give you a time frame. They just say 2 to 3 months. Some might take shorter than that. It all depends on how soon they receive your verification requests. If your documentation at the point of submission, there are no issues. Another thing I need to point out before I forget, very, very important, HCPC does not accept personal email addresses for verification. So please try as much as possible when you are doing your application to source for an official professional email address. They don't want to see it at yahoo.com, at gmail.com. So they need professional email. That is one thing that will make them turn down your application or tell you to provide an official email address. That is going to delay your application. If there is a document missing, it is going to delay your application. But if everything is as it should be when you submit, you should be able to hear from them in 1 to 2 months, like they said. When you hear from them, they will tell you, oh, we have heard back from your verifiers, everything is okay. You can go ahead and pay your registration fee to be registered as a biomedical scientist. They can get back to you and say, oh, there's a contradiction in your verification. You stated you started your degree on 1st of January 2000. Your institution has come back to say you started on the 10th of February 2000. Can you please explain? So these are things that can delay your application. So once everything goes fine, you pay your registration fee. HCPC runs a 2-year cycle for biomedical scientists. So our last cycle just started on the 1st of December 2023. It's going to run till the 30th of November 2025. Every 2 years. So the application, this registration fee for the 2-year cycle is currently at £196.24.
Okay, so you mentioned a few things there, and I think one of the most important things here is the contact information that you provide when you register with an email address, and your contact details should be accurate. The number of times people misspell email addresses or have extra punctuation where there should be a full stop, that just leads to extra, delays. And maybe that if they can't get in contact with you, if they've got any questions, they won't be able to, find the answer they need, and your application may be rejected completely. I remember once somebody contacted me and they said they applied for I think it was a paramedic, as a paramedic registrant, when they were, can I change it to a biomedical scientist? I think that's a huge error. First of all, you're applying for the wrong profession, and it's very, very. It looks bad on your behalf as well. Attention to detail, if you're making these mistakes.
Yeah.
So be careful about what you write. Get your application checked by people if you can do. Make sure there's no spelling mistakes. And the example you gave of your course start date, if somebody said they started their course on the 10th of January, but the university turns around and said it was on the 1st of January, even though it's a week or so difference, but it is still a discrepancy, and you have to explain that. And so maybe it's worthwhile having that information at hand before you do the application so that you don't make these mistakes.
Yeah, what I usually advise people is to correspond, as in cross-reference with your institution. So sometimes you have graduated many, many years ago. The person on seats that will be attending to your record might not even remember you, or is someone different. So it is usually advisable to take note of the dates you included in your application form. Let it correspond with the dates stated on your course information form the university provided to you, and also notify the contact person that will be responsible for replying the verification let the person know that this is the date that was in your application form. So there will be no discrepancy in terms of when he or she's replying.
Sure. So I think we've spoken about the application enough now. There's a few other questions I've got about the general process. Some people apply while they're still in the native country. So they might be, back home in Nigeria, in Ghana, in India, anywhere in the world. And other people apply when they get to the UK. So in terms of requirements to actually work in the UK, what do you need? Can you just, get a job? Or is it slightly more complex than that? What visas do you need?
Okay. Okay. In the UK, first of all, it depends on what your status is in the UK. Are you a student, an international student? That means you're on a study visa. That means you have 20 hours limits work restriction on your visa. During COVID period, that limit was lifted for healthcare workers, where we saw students working full-time in the NHS in healthcare. But unfortunately, COVID is gone. It's a strict rule. So most hiring managers would not want you to work for 20 hours. They need you full-time. So that is a bottleneck for international students on a student visa who want to work. On the other hand, if your status, maybe you're on holidays, some schools have like outside term time, like 2 months or 3 months break, you're allowed to work full time. If at that point you can get a job, definitely you can work. If you're not a student, maybe a dependent, or you're on another type of visa, you could apply either through agencies. They have local agencies that's you're going through the agency to the trust. You're not going directly. Or alternatively, you can apply on the NHS website on tracks. That is, you're applying directly to the trust, which it could be a bank job, it could be a permanent job. And just to point out, most people are looking out for sponsorship. That's they need sponsorship to transit from either a student visa, if you're within the UK, and the sponsored job for a site, it is only a biomedical scientist, band 5 upwards, that is eligible for sponsorship. You cannot be sponsored as a med lab assistant, a band 2. You cannot be sponsored as a band 3 or a band 4 associate practitioner. Some people get it wrong. They chase after a band 3 MLA. They think they can be sponsored. Absolutely no way. On the other hand, challenges with experience. Most people, they say you need UK experience. Ways to get about it. You can try volunteering. I know there are no opportunities, but you just need to ask. You could approach the trust or the managers to volunteer, even if it's once or twice a week, volunteer without pay. That is one way of getting experience. Also, some people, there's some agencies that do like a few months training, like live practical training. Like that. Yeah, it also gives people some for hands-on UK experience to add to their foreign experience. Yeah, and also I also partner with PathLab. We do like a mentorship tutorial class where we give some information to people. It has proven useful to some group of people to either clinch a job or help them in their job as well. So I think I've answered all the question, or is there any other thing you want to know regarding a job in the... Then for those from outside the UK that want to get a job in the UK international, that means you need a skilled worker visa to be able to do that job. That means you have to be sponsored by the employer. It is highly competitive. Your experience needs to stand out for you to get shortlisted, first of all, for the job. And that means you need to work very well on your supporting information in the part of your application. You need to look at the job specification, the person specification. You need to tell them how you match, why you're the best suit for that job. And if you get a short list, you need to be able to demonstrate your knowledge and experience to be successful. If you land a job, you're successful, the employer would be able to provide sponsorship for your skilled worker visa. That's what you need to use to do the job in the
Sure.
UK.
So you've answered a lot of the questions that I had about finding jobs, but there's a few more which we'll come on to a bit later. But in terms of the visas, you've mentioned about student visas. People that are here on a student visa can work 20 hours a week, and also they can work during the holidays in between their studies full time. For those that are still abroad, um, what do you think is better? Should you apply for your HCPC registration first, or the visa first? Or should you do them both concurrently? Because you can't apply for a job until you've got the registration. And also, you can't apply for the job until you've got the visa. So,
No, no, you can't apply for the job until you have the registration. You can't apply for the visa until you have the job.
I see. Because my.
That's how it
Sure,
works. Because when you get a job offer, they would provide you the sponsorship.
sure,
That is what you require to apply for your
sure.
visa.
So, in a lot of the job applications that I've seen, there's always a line at the bottom which says you must, have the right to work in the UK.
Have a right to work. Yep, ignore that. It's a
Okay.
standard. Ignore that. It's a standard thing. They've not updated it. Many of them still sponsor. It's at the discretion of the employer at the end of the day. If at the end of the day, you're the best suits and they really need you, they are going to sponsor. So don't allow that clause deter you from applying at all. Still go ahead, put in your application. You never
So
can
you heard it
tell.
here first. David has said, even apply despite what it says at the bottom of that application form. Because I know many people who have, not applied because they read that and they're like, oh, I'm not eligible, therefore I won't. I think, like you mentioned, it's important to have your HCPC registration because you must tick that box. If you don't have the registration, you can't practice, and therefore you won't be eligible for the job. But you can still apply even if you don't have the visa at the time because you can subsequently get sponsorship. I've seen some trusts even say they will sponsor people, within the job application. They will say we offer sponsorship, and even if they don't, like you said, there's no harm in
Yeah,
trying. The worst that can happen is they say no, and if they say no, that's fine. We'll try again. So moving on, in terms of
exactly.
applying for jobs, my question here is, one of the things that people always struggle with is you're registered, and it's finding that job. Where do you look? What should you do? And how do you apply for a job? Because, like you said, experience is very important. If you're newly qualified, if you're in the UK,
Uh,
or you're applying internationally where you've got very limited or no UK experience, how do you stand out from the rest of the crowd in a very competitive, profession?
I'll state that again. I know I had mentioned something like that before. First of all, where to apply? We have the NHS jobs website. We have the tracks. job. It's more like a synchronized platform. It's free. You just need to create your profile and save it, and you can always search for and apply to any job. But one thing I need to advise candidates: do not use one SOP for all the jobs. Always take time to modify your SOP per adverts. Some people don't want to take the pains. They just use one SOP and throw it in for 30 or 50 applications. It doesn't work that way. You need to sit down, take time. Application adverts A. You sit down, tailor your SOP. That your supporting statements is the most important part of your application. That is where emphasis is laid on whether you're going to be shortlisted or not. You've ticked all the other boxes. Your HCPC registered. You understand basic things they're checking for. The most important area is the supporting statement. They're going to be checking how you meet the person's specification for the job. For example, your knowledge, your experience. What analyze if it's laboratory automation? What analyzers have you used? What analyzers have you been able to troubleshoot? Are you involved in training? Are you involved in quality? Are you involved in things outside just the mix result obtained? That's the laboratory process. That's one part of the question. The other part, what do you do to gain advantage in terms of being competitive? First of all, some people have found themselves here for a master's degree. That's going through a master's degree. That is one advantage they have given themselves as an international. You being in the UK, undergoing or completing a master's degree is one advantage. Secondly, if you're, as I said earlier, volunteering, if you're able to get a lab or somewhere, even if it is to shadow a colleague, if you're able to get approval for shadowing or volunteering, it will go a long way to help. You have agencies that run training as well. If you don't give it, if you don't have it, you can't give what you don't have. That is the honest truth. So there's some experience that may be appealing. You understand? You might be international. Yes, you don't have UK experience, but your exposure in wherever you are, whichever part of the country you are, you have been exposed to up-to-date techniques. You're not limited to maybe in terms of practice. Then that will look appealing to the employer. If you're in a lab in your country where they are limited, that's the diagnostic aspect is limited, and maybe you have like a reference lab or should I say like a diagnostic center in your country where they have more up-to-date techniques, why not try and see if you can get attached there, even if it's to volunteer, just to get some exposure or experience. That's all this gives you an additional advantage. That's what I think.
At the beginning, you mentioned the importance of tailoring your application to the requirements of the job. And I remember when I graduated, I'm guilty of this as well. It's very easy to use the same supporting statement for 50 jobs. And,
Yeah.
when I speak to managers or people hiring at the moment, I've seen people who have used a microbiology supporting statement for a biochemistry role. It says, I'm very excited to be working in a
Yes.
microbiology lab when the job is for a biochemistry job, for example, or a hematology job. And at that point,
Yes.
this person is not serious. They've not read the job description. They're just copying and pasting what they've done before.
They just copying and pasting the
Exactly.
supporting
Well,
statements.
one of the things one of my managers mentioned to me once was that, sometimes you get 40 applications for one position, 40, 50, even more. And so the person who's reviewing the application may not have time to sit down and read it in detail. So they want to do as quickly as possible tick box exercise where they can say, yes, this person fits this requirement. They do this, they do this, they do this.
Yes, we use the tick box. Yes.
So one of the best ways, of fulfilling that requirement is if when writing your personal statement you have the essential job description and the criteria on one side. Look through what they need. So if they say, for instance, you need to have a degree, that will be already provided earlier in your application. Say you need to have experience of using, for example, a pipette or a centrifuge, because that's part of the job. You can mention that in your supporting statement, and if you do it in the same order, then as they're reading through one document, they can tick off in your application to say, yes, this person can use a centrifuge, this person understands abnormal and normal results, this person understands the importance of quality control, this person understands what to do if an analyzer stops working, troubleshooting, etc. And they can just read through your personal statement and also the job description and the job criteria and quickly mark it off. That's not to say you start writing in bullet points saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. It's important to explain with examples of when you've done it and how you've done it. So if you've used a particular analyzer, you can mention that. You can mention the QCs you've used. You can mention the troubleshooting, and that adds realism to your story as well. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to sell yourself in a way which is
And
believable to the person who's reading
training
it.
as well. Yeah, for the HCPC application, I would advise if you're not sure how to go about it, even with this video, or even after reading the information on the HCPC website, some people get confused. It's best to seek support from someone who has been through the process to guide you so you don't end up making mistakes. On the other hand, secondly, it's just to stick to what we've already said, make efforts to try and get the UK experience. If you don't have that, if you're in the UK, make efforts. They are like short posts, bank. You could apply to bank posts. Some people don't even look at those bank positions. They are part-time posts. If you're in a place like London, I know some people in London, they do part-time as students. Yes, they are able to offer them part-time 20 hours on their student visa. That is because of the demand in London. So they are able to accommodate you on a part-time basis. On the other hand, I think we've covered everything.
I think that covers all my questions. You've done a fantastic job in answering all the questions that I had. These are just questions people ask me because I studied in the UK. I did my registration portfolio in the UK. So I don't have any experience of this topic whatsoever. And so it's been very helpful speaking to somebody who's been through the
Okay.
process and who can answer these questions, because I feel I can't do it justice having not been through the process at all. If there are any questions at the bottom of this video when we post it, I'm going to message David and be like, hey, David, some people's asked a question. Do you want to answer those?
No problem. Just another thing, important thing. If you're in the UK studying on a student visa and your course has run out, that you've completed your studies, that means your visa is running out. That means you're eligible to a 2-year post-study visa. if you did a master's degree. So I would recommend, don't put yourself under pressure getting a sponsored job within the short time frame you have as you've completed your studies. I would advise switch your visa to the post-study. That means you've gotten yourself sufficient time, your immigration status is secured for another 2 years. Within that 2 years, apply for permanent jobs in the NHS, that's direct application or bank. Also chase up locum jobs. Use that 2 years to build up, even if it is an MLA or an associate practitioner, a band 2, a band 3, a band 4. You can start with that. It gets your 2 feet into the door of the lab. That is the most important thing. Even if your job description will be limited, you're doing what, even if you're HCPC registered, but at that point you are being employed as an MLA band 2 and your scope is restricted, your 2 feet are already in the door. You have started doing something. Sometimes an opportunity may come up within that department. You would have advantage to apply because you're already working with them. So I see so many people, they are HCPC registered, they're chasing biomedical science jobs. It's not coming. Why not change the narrative? There is no harm working as a band 2 MLA. There is no harm working as a band 3 or a band 4. At least you start from somewhere.
And like you said, one of the things that jobs require is experience. And even if you get into lab as an MLA or an AP, a band 3 or a band 4, you can start building up that experience. And while you're doing that, while you're building up that experience, you can also still apply for your biomedical scientist jobs as well. That's not to say don't apply to them at all, but you can do them together. Just so you get yourself into working in a lab in the UK, you can get that UK experience, and then you can put it on your CV, on your application to say, yes, I have worked in a UK lab. I have worked and used, UK processes and UK guidelines, and then go on to apply for your biomedical scientist job.